And Dean, please take us through your training. Happy training, everybody.
Good morning, everybody, and hello from Dublin. As Justina has told you, my name is Dean Hogan. I'm a career coach and trainer. I've been working with the Euraxis Network for the past 7 years now. I have actually, just to correct something that Justina said, I have done work on many occasions in various contracts for the Irish Universities Association, but I don't actually work for them. I've been working right across the European research area in areas like career development, public engagement, networking, leadership, and I'm also heavily involved in the mentoring program. Obviously, most of my work is around career development. What we're going to be covering today is obviously interview skills and competencies. We do have a very limited amount of time, so I will try to get through the slides as quickly as I can without rushing, and hopefully we will have some time at the end for questions. But we do know we have a very tight schedule because there is another online training course following on this one immediately. This is the agenda that we're going to be following. We're going to be talking about your key skills, which are really important for researchers, matching your skills to the role, etc. You can see this list yourself, and we will be going through each one of those. But I suppose most importantly for you guys, we'll be talking about samples of interview questions, and more importantly, how you can understand what information they're looking for when they're asking certain questions at job interview. The learning outcomes we want from this is we want your job application interview competencies to be raised to a high competitive standard. You guys as researchers should also be professionally familiar with how to prepare for a job interview, different interview techniques, the different type of interview formats, and the different type of interview questions that you may face. CV and interview skills are essentially a collection of competencies that emphasize attention to detail. I'll explain why detail is so important, and progressive complementary steps. When you send your CV in, the main purpose, really the only purpose of a CV, should be to secure a specific job interview for you. This particular module is part of an overall training program that we developed within Euraxis that has numerous other modules. It was done in, we did it in conjunction with Tancheva, Krasimira Tancheva of the British Council office in Sofia. It's called a Researcher Toolkit, and the link is there. You guys will obviously have all of these slides made available to you after the training. The whole purpose of the program was simple. From the European Commission's point of view, a lot of researchers are being lost to research. Now, we know there's lots of different reasons for that, and we know there are many reasons for that. But the main reason is that a lot of researchers don't, when they enter third level education, most of them don't even intend to do a PhD. Many of them don't intend to be researchers. So they kind of fall into it from one step to another without actually planning ahead of time. It's never too early to begin planning, and it's never too late to begin planning. So the reason why the Commission are funding a lot of this work is because the Commission believes that more researchers equals more innovation equals more economic activity, which in turn means more employment and greater benefits to society in general. So the type of tools that are in the toolkit, I'm going to make these will all be available to you guys too, should you need them. My IDP website is really important. I'm giving you this information because we will talk a little bit about, during the interview training, we will make references to this. I strongly suggest that you go through all of these tools. You'll find them really, really helpful. The IDP Science Careers website is fantastic. It gives you an interactive questionnaire where you can cover your values, your interests, and more importantly, your skills. For researchers, your skills are everything. The most important part of your interaction with potential employers. As a researcher, your skills are your passport to take you wherever you want to go. How far you go once you get there will depend on your soft skills. We have a personality section, the personalities website. This is a private, basically it's there to make money for the people who run it, but there's a lot of free personality tests called 16 personalities on it. Strongly suggest you use it. They will try to upsell you, but you don't necessarily need to use those other areas. The purpose of a lot of these tools is it saves a lot of time when you sit down with a career advisor or a career coach. So instead of the coach and yourself spending many hours talking about your personality and your values and your interests, if you do these interactive quizzes and tests, you get a feed out and results, and that moves the conversation forward a lot more. The National Postdoctoral Association website, that is from the United States, and that just basically gives you a list of the core competencies that a researcher should have. So when you're doing your skills audit, it's really important that you list all of the skills that you have. Discover is a European website, Careers Beyond Academia. The same thing with the Interact website. And then there's some really good e-booklets. The Career Development Toolkit for Researchers, 10 Career Paths for PhDs, which will give you lots of ideas and plenty of food for thought, and the 5-Minute Career Action Plan, which is another e-booklet. Now, I strongly recommend you check those out. If you're thinking about planning your career or wondering what the next steps are, these tools you'll find very, very helpful. So basically the process that these tools bring you through are, where are you now? How did you get to your current situation? And then you do your self-assessment. You go through your values, your interests, which are really your passions and your motivations, the things that get you out of bed in the morning. Your personality is important. That talks about what kind of working environment is best suited for you, how you like to work. I see a question there. Is anybody else getting bad audio output? Justina, will you? I'll carry on, but if there's a problem with the audio, please let me know. And the skills audit is really important as well, where you make a list of all your skills, because when you go to look for a job, you will need to have your skills, and I'll explain that when we move on a little further. Obviously, once you go through all that, you should get some advice and counseling to make sense of all this information you have about yourself. Then you develop your career development plan and you plan your journey. Then we talk about networking and your elevator pitch. Basically, the elevator pitch is when you're introducing yourself to somebody at a conference or a seminar, etc. How you introduce yourself. It's maybe 2 or 3 short sentences about who you are and what you do and what you want to do. And please remember that the whole purpose of this module is that you would have identified a job specifically within your plan, and you're going after a specific job. So this exercise is not just about applying for any job in general. This is about applying for a job that you've specifically targeted, or an organization that you've specifically targeted. Now, the information still applies no matter what your approach is, but this is the approach when we take when you start to develop your career development plan. So first thing you're looking at when you apply for a job is the role itself. Descriptive words taken from a sample job advert. 2 important tips here. First of all, when you apply for a job, keep a copy of the advertisement or the notice, because once they close applications, they will take it down offline in most cases. So it's important that you have a copy of that so you can prepare for the job interview, because there'll be a lot of information there. Similarly, if you're doing an online application, and before you submit, copy all of the information you have submitted into a Word document. Again, you will be able to prepare yourself, and then you'll be reminded of what you wrote in your job application. And also, sometimes these job applications can take some time. Occasionally they will crash, and if they crash, you'll have to start all over again. So make sure that you highlight these in your personal profile, all of the matching skills that you have to the role that they are advertising for. So as I said, you will have developed your own skills list. So when you are looking at a job advertisement, look at your own skills list and highlight the skills that you have that match or are very close to the competencies that they require for the role they're advertising for. The next thing you do is you list any related skills or experiences that you feel could add value to the role that you're applying for, because you don't always have, especially if you have a limited work history, you will not always have a matching skill set to match the skills that they are requiring. But you may have some skills that are related or very close. And if there's still adequate space after you've done that, you may list any other competencies that you feel have a relevance to the role, to the company or organization, based on the research that you would have done about the company before you do your job interview. Just want to show you a quick example of the layout and the most important part of the CV. This is the top half of the first page of your CV. If you look at the top, you'll see there you've got the contact information, then you've got the personal profile. This is essentially a very similar, another example of what your elevator pitch would be. It's basically a short, concise paragraph outlining your personal and professional characteristics. Then after that, underneath, you list your key skills. Now, this is really important, and I'll explain why. Here in Dublin, because we are the first stop coming into Europe from the United States, and because we speak English, we have a lot of multinational corporations have their European headquarters here in Ireland. I was out at Microsoft about 3 or 4 years ago with a group of people, and we were doing some training. And we asked them how long they look at each CV when they get job applications. And they said initially, the first screening, they will only look 4 seconds. 4 seconds at each CV, and then they will decide if you go into the in pile, go on to the next stage, or you go out. So that person is looking for the key skills that they are looking for, that they have advertised for. So after you put in your contact information and your quick little piece of information about yourself and your personal profile, the next thing you must list is the skills that you have that match with the skills they are looking for. And that's going to be at the top half of the first page. After that, you begin with your work experience. You list that in terms of, your most recent role. Keep a copy, as I said, of the original job advertisement, because that will be really important. So what you want to include under each job title in your employment history, you should list your duties, the responsibilities that you had, and the achievements that you made while you were working there. You will also list the dates you started and finished each role, and ensure that your dates are correct and sequential. That you don't want to have anything where your details look sloppy, because that is a reflection on how you do your work. You don't want any unforced errors or silly mistakes in your CV. I'm only spending a very short time on CV because this module is really all about the interviews. So what else can you offer? When you're listing your work history, be sure to highlight any competencies, roles, or experiences that complement or add value to the role that you were applying for. It is a good idea to also highlight any aspects of your CV that coincides with the stated ethos, values, and direction of the organization that you're applying to. This will be based, of course, on research that you will have done on the organization that you were applying to. Now, some people may not have a very long work history. So you may be applying for a job that is directly linked to the education skills, the skills that you've got in education. You might be coming straight out of a PhD and you may not have a long work history. In that case, it is okay for you to list your educational history first. And what you will do is you will emphasize the parts of your education that have prepared you specifically for the role that you were applying for. After you've done your educational history, you will then put in your work history. Don't be afraid to put in any kind of menial tasks, or, if you had part-time jobs, if you worked as a waiter. They want to see these things because they want to see that you are someone who accepts responsibilities and is not afraid to do some hard work. I've already mentioned that. And once you've completed your professional and educational history, you may then list your interests and hobbies. It is best to be honest when listing your interests, as they are indicative of the passions that you have and what motivates you. And some of the topics that you're discussing may come up for discussion during the job interview. So don't try to choose any kind of exotic pastimes like scuba diving, because you may find somebody on the interview panel who does scuba diving also. So make sure you know what you're talking about. Another tip is um, there's no such thing as a generic CV anymore that you would send out for all jobs. Every CV must be tailored specifically for the role that you're applying for, as I've already indicated. However, you should have a master CV that lists all of your work history and, more importantly, all of your skills. Because over time, you will forget some skills that you will have earned, and people always have many more skills than they actually believe. And when we do a skills audit with a bunch of researchers, most researchers, we ask them at the beginning, how many skills do you think they have? And they might say maybe 10, 12, 15. In many cases, when they get the full list is always at least 100% more. So if they thought they had 15, they'll usually have 30. And once you do that skills audit, it is a little time consuming. So make a list of all your skills so you only have to do it once. And sometimes you can use them for specific jobs that you're applying for. Your references, lastly, before we get into the interviews, it's no longer best practice to list references on your CV. You don't want to be sending personal data of other people, especially with recruiting agencies, because your CV could be passed around, and there's also GDPR considerations. So instead of writing your references on your CV, you may write references or excellent references available upon request. Usually a prospective employer will request your references after a successful interview. So that will give you some time to contact your references and let them know that they'll be receiving a phone call. And sometimes they'll have a question for you also. They might ask, well, what kind of job is this? So they'll know what kind of information to give. And that way, the people who are kindly giving you references will not be getting unnecessary phone calls from people they don't know. The details of your CV, try to limit your non-academic CV to 2 pages, 3 at most. The CV should be clearly laid out and easy to read with adequate white spaces. Use professional fonts and styles consistently. They should be the same size, except when listing your name and headings. All headings should be in bold or italics. All bullet points and paragraphs need to be consistent, plain, and aligned. Your CV must be accurate in content, spelling, and grammar, informative but concise. I can't emphasize, guys, how important it is to make sure you don't have any spelling mistakes in your CV. It can be the difference between getting an interview and not getting the interview. You need to proofread your CV, have somebody else proofread your CV, and make sure it is no longer than necessary. 7 out of every 10 CVs received by some high-profile organizations contain spelling errors. It is a bad reflection on you and your attention to detail. After you apply for a role, you should be expecting a possible telephone call inviting you for an interview. Keep your phone turned on, and when you are busy, make sure you have a simple but professional voicemail. If a potential employer calls you and they get what you consider to be a funny voicemail, they may consider it to be unprofessional. So it won't give a good impression of you. Think about how you answer your phone when you don't recognize the calling number. If you've just applied for a job, don't necessarily, ignore numbers that you don't know. Don't answer in a suspicious manner either. Um, Always think about your social media presence. Is there anything that could be slightly embarrassing or may look unprofessional? If an organization is thinking about hiring you, they will check out your social media presence. So the big thing about job interviews that we get is we get a lot of people that worry and get nervous about the job interview. It's important to remember that if you get the job interview, you've got that interview based on your experience and your skills. Um, I've been on enough interview panels myself to know that every person that walks through the door, you want this person to be the person that you're hiring. So that way you're not worried about, are we going to get the right employee? Once they bring you to the job interview, they really do want to hire you. The job interview is just a chance for you to prove and show that everything is in your CV is there. And with your soft skills and your communication skills, you can show them that you have even more. to offer. So when you're preparing for an interview, you should realize that this is your opportunity to convince them that you are indeed the best candidate to fill their vacancy. So you try not to get too nervous, and the more prepared you are, the less nervous you will be. And we're going to talk about now about how you can prepare. During an interview, the employer will look for evidence of your skills and competencies. Now, you'll have already put them in your CV, so they'll want to talk to you a little bit more. Basically, this is, can you do the job? Next thing they're looking for are your interests, your passions, and your motivations. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Will you do the job? And then your personality and your values. If you match their ethos and their culture, will you fit in with your fellow employees? Will you fit in with the company? So these are what they're looking for. So this is the mindset you need to have when you're going into the interview. So there's different types of job interviews. So we'll talk about the basic kinds. The first one we'll talk about will be the traditional interview. Then we'll talk about the competency-based interview. Then the strengths-based interview. Telephone and video interviews, which obviously since COVID have become more popular. And then occasionally you might get a whiteboard interview. Some researchers have experienced whereby a whiteboard is in the room and they will be asked to solve problems, explain or discuss ideas using a whiteboard during an interview. Generally, they should give you prior notice if there's going to be a whiteboard used. Telephone interview or screening. Since the advent of Zoom, WebEx, and video, telephone interviews are becoming practically extinct. But I'll put this in because a lot of the information here also applies to video interviews as well. You should prepare for these as seriously as you would for a face-to-face interview. Much of the impact you will make will come through your voice, so it is even more important that you sound animated and enthusiastic. In a telephone interview, it can be easier to hide your nerves and relax. If you smile, it will come across in your voice, and allow for possible time delays on the line so you're not talking over the interviewer and the other people on the line. Telephone tips: ensure you have a suitable environment where you won't be disturbed. Again, this applies equally to video interviews. You can have your CV next to you. This is an advantage you have with video and telephone interviews. Normally in a face-to-face interview, you're not going to have your CV right there beside you. So with video and telephone interviews, you'll have your CV there that you can reference. Practice before the phone interview, preferably with a friend. Prepare a smooth opening, what you want to say about the company or what you want to say about the job interview. Avoid distractions. Make sure you're not eating, drinking, or smoking for obvious reasons because they will hear it. Video interviews, a little bit more complicated. First of all, test your technology. Make sure your camera, your speakers, your mic, and your Wi-Fi are all working beforehand. Make sure there's not going to be a high demand on your Wi-Fi at the same time as you're doing your job interview. You may have a younger sibling or another person downloading a movie or playing online games. Make sure that there's not going to be that high demand. If your Wi-Fi is not dependable, you could possibly plug straight into your modem. If possible, have a backup computer or a backup device in case you have problems with the initial device, with your laptop. And make sure you're in a do not disturb environment. Ensure your interview will not be interrupted by messaging apps or any other software. The same with screensavers. For example, you could be in the middle of a job interview and a screensaver could pop up. Practice logging onto your phone hotspot in case of Wi-Fi failure. That's important too. Always have a backup plan, always be ready. It shows also that you are capable and ready and always prepared. It says a lot about your professionalism. Again, video interviews, make sure you use a computer instead of a phone. Phone is a bad look for a job interview. Only use the phone in cases of emergencies. Make sure you understand what platform the interview will it be on. Will it be on WebEx? Will it be on Zoom? Make sure you're familiar with that platform. Practice on it beforehand. Practice screen sharing and muting, etc. Excuse me. Practice looking directly at the camera instead of the screen. That's really important because like in face-to-face interviews, eye contact is very important. Smile a little more than you normally would, even if you feel a little bit foolish. We can always appear in video interviews that, you know, it's lacking a little energy. You know, you're looking down at the bottom of the screen. Sometimes you're seeing the top of people's head. Look straight into the camera and smile as much as possible. Try to appear more energetic. You might feel a little bit silly, but it will come across better in the job interview. We can all look very passive on video, as I say. Practice with an honest friend, somebody who will tell you the truth. You know, practice the stories you're going to tell, practice any questions that you may have. Um, Avoid a cluttered or busy background. Make sure there's no movement behind you. And one other thing I'll say about having the camera on the eye level, it's really important, because if you have the camera below eye level, it's usually not a very flattering angle. If you have the camera above the eye level, you're assuming an inferior position and you're looking up to them. Um, Make sure your lighting is straight on instead of the side or underneath or overhead. You know, any of those can make you look a little bit sinister or a little bit strange. Make sure the lighting is straight on, so they can see your face clearly. Um, Earbuds are fantastic. They avoid audio complications. You're not going to be distracted by noise. But you know, the big headphone cans are probably not a great idea unless you have no other option. And again, you can have your CV and your cover letter and a bottle of water available, just to help you. Sometimes even if you're nervous and you want to think about answering a question, give yourself a couple of extra seconds to think by taking a sip of water. Just be relaxed and take your time. So, preparing for the job interview. Sometimes in preparation, a good idea is, so an individual person will contact you either by telephone or email inviting you to the job interview. You can come back to them, or else you can ask them at the same time. And this is important information for you to have, because it helps you to manage your expectations and relax your nerves. Because one of the things that make us nervous is fear of the unknown. And so ask them how many people will be conducting the interview, or how many people will be on the interview panel. You know, this can be really helpful. I remember many years ago going in for a job interview, and I was really shocked because the whole board of directors were sitting around this enormous table. And the shock was so great, I never really recovered. It was a horrendous interview that I think about sometimes now today. Um, have the identities of the interview panel been decided? They may even tell you who the names of the people who are going to be on the panel. You can look those people up and learn a little bit about them too. You can also find out what their title or job is. Will the interview have a specific format? I spoke to you earlier about the formats, and we'll go into some sample questions in a little while. These questions will help you to be more prepared. And if other people don't ask the same questions that you've asked, you'll have a competitive advantage over the other applicants. Make sure you know your CV completely and ensure that you can clarify any gaps in the CV. Like, you know, what were you doing in this year when you don't seem to have a job? What about those 2 years? Make sure you can clarify any gaps. You will be asked about them, so have an answer ready. Research the company or organization completely. Remember, within the greater scheme of all the modules, this will be a role that you have specifically targeted for your own career plan. What is the history of the organization? How or why did this organization start up? Do they have a unique culture? Do they have a unique identity? What are their short, medium, and long term business goals and ambitions? What do they want to achieve? And then you think about, you know, how would you fit into that? What can you add to what they want to do? How does the organization's plans fit in with your own plan or journey? Years ago, when many, you know, in previous years, when people were applying for jobs, we would always pretend that we wanted to work for this organization forever. This was the only company we were ever going to work for. That is not true anymore. Companies expect you to move on unless you're going to be promoted within the organization. So when you're coming into this assuming that you have your own career plan, talk to them about how your career plan um, intersects with their own plans and why you chose them and how you think you can help them achieve their plans and what you hope to gain in terms of experiences from working with them. Think of how your personality and your interests fit in with what they do. think of how relevant your CV and experiences are to the role and the organization. These are all things that you can talk about in job interviews, because another thing that we get nervous about is, what will I talk about in the job interview? Prepare some related talking points that highlight your suitability for the role and the organization. Before the interview, like, you should think, what do I really want them to know about me? Write it down. There may be 2, 3, 5 things that you really want them to know. And so look for opportunities during the job interview to give them that information. While researching the organization, you should probably prepare some questions too, particularly about their processes and future plans. At the end of every interview, you're nearly always asked if you have any questions too. And obviously, stating the obvious before the job interview, make sure you turn your phone off. On the day of the interview, dress smart. If in doubt, wear business clothing. It is better to be overdressed than underdressed. Um, much better. Punctuality is vital. You never want to be late for a job interview, get you off to a really bad start. Ensure that you know where you're going, ensure what your transport links are. Always account for extra time in case you encounter issues. You don't want to be arriving in the interview sweaty and out of breath. Smile at everybody from the moment you enter the building. Be professional and polite with everybody that you meet. Every person you meet is a potential colleague, and they may be asked for their opinion. The receptionist may be asked how you were. People you meet in the elevator on the way up, um, they might mention to the job interviewers that they met you as well. During the interview, nonverbal communication speaks louder than words. 55% of our message is communicated through our body language, especially in job interviews. Your handshake should be warm but not too firm. Um, Men should be very careful, about squeezing people's hands. It's nice to be warm and friendly. Don't try to show them how strong you are. A lot of people get very annoyed with that. Make sure you're smiling, making steady eye contact during your handshake with each person that you meet. You may be, if there's 2 or 3 people on the interview panel, you may be introduced to them individually by their name. Repeat their name, shake their hand, make eye contact, and smile. Your facial expressions, again, are important. Make sure you're aware of them. Eye contact is important when you're answering questions and asking questions. Establish a rapport if you can. Always look at the person that is speaking or the person that you were speaking to. Listen carefully to what they are saying or what they are asking. This is the best way for an interview to become a conversation. And once an interview goes into an area of being a conversation, this is a really positive development for you as a applicant. If you did not hear correctly or understand the question, just relax and ask them to repeat or elaborate on the question. Better to do that. It shows that you're careful, you're thoughtful, rather than answer a question that you thought you were asked when in fact you weren't. Demonstrate your listening skills. Never talk over the interviewer. Your tone of voice should be friendly and professional. Be sure to articulate your answers correctly and avoid very short answers. A lot of the feedback that we get from industry is they complain about the communication skills of researchers. So you don't want to be mumbling your answers. You want to expand on your answers as much as possible, but make sure you know what you're talking about. Don't speak just for the sake of it. Again, your posture is very important. You don't want to be slumping in your seat. You don't want to have your arms folded. Um, sit straight. Control your body language and your facial expressions. Be positive when you are speaking about topics that interest them or motivate you. Let your enthusiasm show. They will like that. Tell them about your journey. Tell them about the career plan that you've decided for yourself. These are the type of things you can talk about. How working with them allows you opportunities to make a difference to a research area that you are really passionate about, while you're contributing to their organization's success and expanding your own competencies and experiences at the same time. Interview formats. We'll get into those now. First of all, you have the traditional interview. Normally what they'll do, they'll have a copy of your CV and they'll ask you questions based on the CV. The interviewer will use your CV as a guide to probe your preferences, decisions you might have made in the past, your achievements, and your academic and other activities. So most common questions asked during a traditional interview: how would you describe yourself? Well, your elevator pitch comes in there. You will have done that in the past with networking training, for example. Could you tell us about your present or your last job? Make sure, please, 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 you only say positive things about your last role and your last employer. Discuss the elements of the role that best relate to the role you are interviewing for. Um, and also, even though you're saying nice things about your present job or your last job, make sure your facial expression does not give away anything else too. You don't want to say, well, I'm moving because my new manager is an idiot. You never want to say these things. It never reflects well on you. What do you know about our organization? This is where you get the opportunity to show how much research you have done. So you should always make sure your research is done beforehand. Why would you like to work for us, basically? So usually your answer around that is discuss what you understand to be the future direction of the organization and how you think they fit in with your own goals and plans. Explain how you can contribute to what they want to do and what you hope to gain in return. Um, what achievements you want to get while you're there, what new competencies you're looking to um, to gain while you're there, what career progression you will be looking for. Help them to understand that you see an alignment between your own personal goals and those of the organization, because you will have specifically targeted them as an organization that you want to work for. Other interview questions in traditional: why do you think you might be a better fit with other applicants than other applicants with similar experiences and qualifications? Tricky question. So this is where you can discuss the positive elements of your personality and your values that apply to this role and how, those match the stated ethos of this organization. Why are you the best person for this role? Your motivations and passions, again, is what you can talk about. This is where your interest assessment will give you plenty to discuss and plenty to tell them about. What is your main strength? If any of your motivated skills match the required skills of the role, discuss these first, as your motivation will come through naturally when you speak about things that motivate you, you because you have you know when we speak about things that motivate us, our enthusiasm comes through naturally. Let your enthusiasm show. What is your main weakness? Terrible question. I have always hated it. I'll give you two possible suggestions for this one. The first one could be that maybe you've recently done a training workshop that you completed. Um, the theme of the training could be used as an example of how you can identify your own areas for development and upskilling. Alternatively, if you've done some research in the role, there may be a small part of the role that you're applying for. Let's say, for example, there might be some database work involved. Well, then you could say, actually, I know I tick all of the boxes for this role, but I know I'll have to learn a little bit about that database work because I haven't done a lot of that. Always pick something small if you're going to talk about the role. Otherwise, talk about training that you've recently completed. And so you're making them know that you are aware that when you have a weakness, you can identify it and correct it. So then we come to some competency-based interview questions. In a competency-based interview, the questions are designed to help candidates give evidence that you have the skills that are needed for this role to perform well. Usually you'll be expected to give an example of how you have demonstrated these skills in the past. The kind of competencies that employers want or value, and these are obviously kind of generic. Communication skills, really important. The job interview itself is a chance for you to demonstrate your communication skills, your interpersonal skills, how you work with others, teamwork, same thing, your problem solving skills. Not only how you solve problems, but do you panic or do you stay relaxed and you stay rational? Your organizational skills, your ability to multitask and be flexible, adaptability, positive attitude, even when things aren't going well, use your initiative. Do you offer solutions? Do you identify problems and then take possible solutions to your supervisor? And most IT related literacy is valued as well. So basically, with a competency-based interview, they want to understand how you think. For instance, how you approach and solve problems, as well as how you apply certain skills that are important to the role. The best approach to take is to use the STAR technique. Some of you may be familiar with this. They want to know whether you've actually had the experiences that prove you can handle this new position. How have you dealt with similar or certain circumstances in the past? So for those of you who don't know, the STAR technique is STAR, situation, task, action, and results. So the situation, and of course, when you're using the STAR technique, you're going to be telling a story. And this when you're doing this, you're taking up time, you're speaking, you're in charge of the job interview for the specific time. They are listening to you. So the situation, you explain the background, include the context. Where and when was this? Explain that you understood that there was a problem and what the possible implications and negative outcomes were if this issue was not addressed. Next is the task. Describe the challenge and expectations. What needed to be done? Explain your thinking and your rationale. What could you do who could you enlist to help you to deal with with this issue? Then the actions. What actions did you take? When and how? What was your decision? Why did you make that decision? Did you need to organize or brief other people to help you? Or did you need to help other people resolve the situation? And lastly, and most importantly, is the results. Explain the results and accomplishments. Were the results immediate or clear? What was the reaction of your colleagues? Be sure to credit the contribution of others, because that demonstrates a generosity that goes well with teamwork. So make sure you don't take all of the limelight for yourself. Explain how you worked well with other people. That's essentially the STAR technique. It's very useful for answering job interview questions, because apart from the fact that you're giving them a lot of information, you can have some stories ready to tell before the job interview, and you're not just giving short monosyllabic answers where you might be just shrugging your shoulders or nodding your head. It's showing your communication skills. Also, make sure when you're using the STAR technique and telling your story that you're making eye contact. Competency-based interview questions, common and frequently asked questions in this. Could you tell us about the time when you used your communication skills effectively? Again, you use your STAR technique. You could talk about presentations that you've made, your ability to communicate your research findings, anything you've done at conferences, seminars, written publications, convey scientific information to a variety of audiences, public engagement, or examples of outreach activities, team leading, etc. As a researcher, you should have many, many examples. And could you tell us about the time when you used your interpersonal skills, one-to-one relationship with colleagues, supporting or helping colleagues or peers, positive team working experiences, dealing with sensitive issues? Can you provide us with an example of when you had to multitask in a workplace? That's easy again for you guys. Use your STAR technique. We all have examples of bad days at work, time management, organizational skills, balancing research with your other commitments like teaching, writing, education, etc. You guys have a lot more to talk about in a job interview than you might realize. Could you tell us about a situation where your problem solving skills really paid off? You know, as a researcher, you may have ready examples, or you may use a story, a dilemma from your non-professional activities, or your in-depth knowledge of specific topics. But again, use your STAR technique. I'm aware our time is moving on, guys. We're going to be finished within 5 minutes, I think. Could you describe a situation in which you used initiative? Are there examples where you suggested positive changes to existing processes or practices? Did you identify inefficiencies that could be corrected? What good ideas have you come up with in the past, and how did you act on them? Your ability to apply research to real life situations, new and complex concepts. Could you tell us about well, we've done that one. Describe a situation in which you motivated others. This is tricky because, you know, we don't always get leadership opportunities early in our career, but have you had team leadership experience in any capacity? If not, can you think of any examples where you could talk about times that you led and motivated by example? Being a supportive colleague and contributing to a healthy and productive working environment is also motivating to your colleagues. So, use those also. Some graduate recruiters use strength-based interviews in their recruitment process, in contrast to competency-based interviews in which employers want to understand what you can do. The main aim of a strengths-based interview for an employer is to establish what you really enjoy doing. The focus is on making sure you do more of what you are good at rather than what you are capable of. Strengths-based interviews have a very simple aim: to find your interests, motivations, and strengths. Now, this can happen, they can use a strength-based interview for a specific role that might be unsuitable for most people, but really suitable for some people. So they want to make sure they hire the right person so they don't have to go through this whole interview process again in 2 months' time. So how to prepare for a strengths-based interview. The truth is you can't really do much preparation apart from being honest, because you don't want to give answers that you think they want to hear. Think about what energizes you both inside and outside of work. Be prepared to be open. Don't try to be something that you're not in a strength-based interview. Be honest about what tasks you don't enjoy doing, and think about how your preferences might fit with the organization's culture and the specific job requirements. Your strengths are innate. Talking about your strengths gives you energy and authenticity. Questions you might be asked: what are you good at? All the answers would be in your self-assessment. Your skills audit, especially your motivated skills. What do you learn quickly? This is usually the topic that you are most interested in. What did you find easiest to learn at school or university? And what subjects do you most enjoy studying? What things give you energy? Your working environment, your colleagues, your expectations, your goals. Lots of things you can speak about there. Describe a successful day you've had. Again, you use your STAR technique. When did you last achieve something you were really proud of? Speak about an achievement in which you invested a lot of time and energy. Then speak about what the achievement meant to you and how much satisfaction or enjoyment it gave you. Speaking about positive experiences, again, it will reflect in your body language and you'll come across as a much more enthusiastic candidate. Do you prefer to start tasks or to finish them? Again, a trick question that I really hate. Give reasons for your answer, but explain that you were being forced to choose and are quite happy to do both unless you really do have a preference. Do you find you have enough hours in the day to complete all the things you want to do? Do you work in an organized and efficient manner? This is what they're trying to find out here. How do you organize and plan your working day? Can you delegate to others or can you help others? What things are always left on your to-do list and not finished? So what they want to know is how you prioritize work and what criteria do you use? What do you enjoy doing the least? Give reasons for your answer and be conscious that your body language is not too negative. At the end of the interview, you will almost certainly be asked if you have any questions. Perhaps you have some questions from your research on the company or role. Your first or second question should not be about topics such as salary or vacation time, etc. If you were asked about your salary expectations, you could inquire about the range of the salary scale before applying. Don't give a specific number. I don't really have time to get into why, to talk a little bit more about that. On the day of the interview, really important, thank the interviewers individually. Again, shake hands, make eye contact. Thank them for the time and the opportunity to discuss what you have to offer. Really important. Ask them when they expect to make a decision and when you should expect a follow-up communication. If you don't ask that question, you're going to drive yourself crazy worrying about when they're going to contact or if they will contact. After the interview, same tips as the original job application. Answer your phone in a professional manner and have an appropriate voicemail message on your phone. Unfortunately, guys, we've run out of time now. There's a few more tips I'd like to give you, but I'm afraid we have to leave it now because we were warned that we're on a very tight schedule. Justina, do you have anything else that you want to add?
Thank you, Dean, very much for this presentation. Sorry, we had to rush through it. I feel like we could have stayed all day talking about this because even for me, it's so fascinating, and I would have myself some questions, as surely everybody else does. So surely we will, for the next time, we will plan a longer one. But thank you
Definitely.
already for this very, like, cover your basics. I think what I'm getting from your presentations, that's for sure, know your basics, and obviously the rest comes later. And applying for a job and interviewing, it's a job in itself. So yes, you have to work to get work, let's say. So thank you, Dean, very much. As you say, unfortunately, we do not have any questions, but I encourage everybody to register to the Euro Access if you haven't done so already, because there is much many more tools and support from the network provided. And we will try to remain available through email for any specific questions, and the presentations will be published on the website. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely Saturday wherever you are. Thank you, Dean, and have a good day.
Thanks a lot, guys. Bye bye.